Well, next tonight on Granada Reports, it's something that affects 1 in every 4 pregnancies but is rarely spoken about. Tonight, in the third of our special reports this week, we examine why miscarriage is such a taboo subject and what help is out there for those going through that heartache.
In a moment, we'll be speaking to Ruth Bender-Attic from a leading charity that supports women who miscarry. But first, Mel Barham has been to speak to 2 women who sadly know only too well what it's like.
A week before, I was choosing what pram I was having. A week later, I was choosing what song I was going to play at my little boy's funeral. It was absolutely awful.
Rachel from Runcorn miscarried her little boy Alfie at almost 22 weeks. He was one of 3 miscarriages she had, and sadly her experience isn't unusual. In fact, 1 in 4 women will lose a baby.
I don't think that you could ever, in a million years, even dream to understand how it feels until you've actually been through it. It was just like a dagger in the heart every time, and it was just like your worst nightmares come true.
For Susan in Bury, it was a nightmare that recurred over and over. She miscarried 6 times.
Heartbreaking. I don't know how I did it, to be honest. I wanted my son to have a little brother or sister, but then when you tell your 4-year-old, as he was at the time, that you're having a little baby brother, how do you explain to him that he's not coming home?
And despite the numbers of women who go through it, miscarriage remains for many a taboo subject.
When I got pregnant, and then you have to sort of go and tell everybody then that you've obviously lost the baby, and makes you feel a little bit inadequate really. And I think maybe that might be a reason of embarrassment really, of that you can't obviously achieve what people are supposed to do naturally.
Suffering in silence, many women don't realise that there is hope. But here at Liverpool Women's Hospital, they run a special miscarriage clinic to diagnose and treat the causes, with women referred from across the UK.
When they first come to us, it is indeed a very difficult and anxious period. But I think what our clinic offers is some hope, and that's a start. There's some comfort in at least there is an avenue where we can investigate these patients.
Here at Liverpool, they're leading the way in helping women who've miscarried with pioneering treatment including bionic bands and abdominal stitches, treatment that has finally given Rachel and Susan what they dreamed of.
She's just given me the greatest gift of life, to be a mum and a family, and you know, she was worth all the heartache.
I feel whole with them now. We're a whole family.
For Rachel and Susan, there has been a happy ending, but they're only too aware that there are many others who feel they'll never be so lucky. Mel Barham, ITV News.
Well, joining us now is Ruth Bender-Attic from the charity Miscarriage Association. How much of a problem is it that we rarely hear talk of miscarriage?
It is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, miscarriage is so horribly common, and yet we don't talk about it. And it seems to be an issue for an awful lot of women, and I have to say for their partners too. Maybe people are embarrassed to talk about it. Certainly people seem embarrassed to hear about it, and maybe that's part of the problem.
I think sometimes people around you are worried about saying the wrong thing and upsetting you, aren't they?
I think that's true, and partly it can happen that people say the wrong thing when they're trying to say the right thing. So they might want to comfort you and make you feel better by saying something like, well, you're young, you can always have another one, or well, at least it was only early in the pregnancy. Obviously not like the ladies we've just seen, but if it was this early, it wasn't really a baby yet. And that doesn't really cheer up most people. It doesn't make them feel better. But equally, sometimes people think if they start talking to you about your miscarriage, they'll upset you even more.
I think in Mel's piece, Rachel and Susan said that one of them said they were embarrassed. It was tough to tell people what had happened. Is there a way to make that easier? You know, do we just need to be more empathetic and just be better listeners, do you think?
I think it helps if we can try and reduce our embarrassment and our anxiety that we very often have about talking about anything that's bad news or related to death or loss or grief. And actually just saying to somebody, I'm really sorry to hear your news, kind of can open the gates, can make them feel that it is okay to talk.
And as we heard from both those ladies, as we saw, they have now been successful and had children. So I suppose, how do we give people who've had this problem hope?
Well, Dr. Darwood was talking about that, wasn't she? And in many cases, if you have investigations, there is hope, actually, even if you don't have investigations, if you have 1 or 2 miscarriages, there may well be hope for the future. But it's also important not to give empty reassurance. Some women who have miscarriages won't go on to have a healthy pregnancy, although happily most of them do.
Okay, Ruth Bender, thanks for joining us this evening. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Ruth. And you can see all of our pieces on the shortage of midwives and maternity units closing right now on our website. The address for that is itv.com/Granada.